There is a distinct, unsettling feeling you get when watching a David Fincher movie. He crafts obsessive, atmospheric nightmares that bury themselves deep into your psyche. From the rain-soaked streets of Seven to the cold precision of Zodiac, his mastery of the thriller genre is unmatched. Today we're ranking all 12 of his movies, breaking down the anatomy of his greatest films, and uncovering what makes his movies impossible to look away from. Number 12. The Killer. The Killer is Fincher on cruise control. Easily his weakest film. It arrived on Netflix in 2023 and felt like a script that sat on his shelf for decades before he finally got around to making it. Michael Fassbender plays a contract killer whose interior monologue walks you through the procedural mechanics of his job. But the problem is that movies and prestige TV spent the last few decades doing this better and with more at stake. The film Fincher probably wanted to make in 1998 landed in 2023, and by then, we'd already seen it. The scary part is that it's Fincher's latest movie, so where he goes from here creatively is anyone's guess. Number 11. Alien 3. Alien 3 was David Fincher's feature debut, and he spent the last 30 years trying to forget about it. The studio handed him a production that was already in chaos. No finished script, sets already being built, decisions being made above his head at every turn. The result was a film nobody was happy with, least of all Fincher, who has publicly disowned it and refused to participate in any home video retrospective of it since. There's actually an assembly cut floating around that's closer to what he intended, and it's a noticeably different film. But as an introduction to one of Hollywood's most meticulous directors, Alien 3 is fascinating precisely because it shows you what Fincher looks like without control, something he never let happen again. Number 10. Mank.
This is a business where the buyer gets nothing for his money but a memory.
Mank is the most personal film in Fincher's catalog, and also the least accessible.
What he bought still belongs to the man who sold it. That's the real magic of the movies, and don't let anybody tell you different.
Gary Oldman plays Herman J. Mankiewicz, the hard-drinking Hollywood screenwriter who co-wrote Citizen Kane with Orson Welles in 1941 and spent the rest of his life arguing he deserved more credit for it. Shot in black and white and co-starring Amanda Seyfried as Marion Davies, it's steeped in 1930s Hollywood politics. If you're already familiar with Citizen Kane, then Mank is rich and beautifully crafted. If you don't, it's a very expensive movie about people you've never heard of having arguments you don't have context for. The reason it exists at all is that Jack Fincher, David's father, wrote the screenplay in the 1990s and died in 2003, never seeing it made. After 2 brutal seasons of producing Netflix's Mindhunter, Fincher told them he wanted to make something smaller instead of a 3rd season. He pitched them his father's script, and 10 Oscar nominations followed, which tells you it's not a bad film. It's just a personal one. Number 9. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Benjamin Button is the outlier in Fincher's filmography. It's a sweeping, effects-driven romance about a man who ages in reverse, born old and growing younger while everyone around him does the opposite. Yet it doesn't really seem like a Fincher movie. Brad Pitt, Cate Blanchett, and a $150 million budget later, it's technically extraordinary, and it has its moments.
For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my
case, too early, to be whoever you want to be.
The screenplay was written by Eric Roth, the same writer behind Forrest Gump, and once you know that, it's difficult to unknow it. The structure, the tone, the southern setting, the narrator looking back on a life is very similar. Forrest Gump is clearly the better movie, but there's still something ambitious about what Fincher was trying to pull off. The movie earned him his first Oscar nomination for Best Director, which tells you the Academy responds to scale and craft even if the emotion doesn't quite land. Number 8. Panic Room. Panic Room is Fincher the technician in his element. A simple story turned into an exciting thriller. It's set in a single location with a solid supporting cast. It stars Jodie Foster, a newly divorced mother with a daughter played by a young Kristen Stewart. They move into a townhouse in New York City that gets robbed on the first night they move in, and they slip into a built-in panic room inside the house. The robbers terrifying them are Forrest Whitaker, Jared Leto, and singer-songwriter-turned-actor Dwight Yoakam. Although Fincher made this in 2002, it still has some 90s DNA. The way the camera meticulously glides from room to room or slides into keyholes, the color palette he uses, it's all signature Fincher. At its core, it's just about a mother protecting her daughter, but he keeps it engaging while making a single apartment feel as tense as anything in his bigger films. Number 7. Gone Girl. Gone Girl is a great first watch, and a slightly disappointing second one, which is a real problem for a film this well made. Based on the best-selling novel by Gillian Flynn, Ben Affleck stars as a husband accused of murdering his wife, played by Rosamund Pike. They're a toxic couple in a movie that should really be a PSA for marriage counseling. Affleck is perfectly cast as a man you're not quite sure whether to feel sorry for or not, and his bubbly frat bro persona works well here. Rosamund Pike gives one of the best performances of the decade, with supporting performances from Neil Patrick Harris, Carrie Coon, and Tyler Perry. But the issue with the movie is structural. There's a massive twist that lands around the halfway point, and once it does, the movie has nowhere left to go except to play out the consequences. It's not that Fincher can't handle twists. Seven and Fight Club prove otherwise. It's that this one shows its hand too early, and the second half becomes a very stylish exercise in watching pieces fall into place. It's just a Fincher film that doesn't quite hold up to the standard he set for himself. Number 6. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Based on the best-selling Swedish novel by Stieg Larsson, Daniel Craig plays a journalist recruited by a wealthy family to investigate a disappearance from 40 years ago, aided by Lisbeth Salander, a brilliant and volatile hacker played by Rooney Mara. The problem is that a perfectly good Swedish adaptation already existed, with Noomi Rapace owning that role so completely that Fincher had actually passed on the project the first time around. His exact words were, "Lesbian hacker on a motorcycle? I don't think so." But then the Swedish version made over $100 million, and suddenly he was interested. Fincher's version is technically immaculate, and Rooney Mara committed fully to the role, but she isn't that girl. If you'd read the book first, the movie feels cramped and rushed, despite running nearly 3 hours. It's a European story with American flair that never quite fits. Fincher planned for the trilogy, but that obviously didn't happen because it didn't make enough at the box office to warrant it. It's not a bad movie. It's just a Fincher film that never quite feels necessary. Number 5. The Game. The Game is Fincher as fun, which in his hands still means psychological torment, just with a dark sense of humor about it. Michael Douglas plays a man so wealthy and so emotionally sealed off that his own birthday has become something to endure rather than celebrate. His father killed himself at the same age he's turning, and his marriage is over. His brother, played by Sean Penn, is a stranger. And then a mysterious company called Consumer Recreation Services begins dismantling his entire life, piece by piece, and you can't tell if it's punishment or manipulation. Sandwiched between Seven and Fight Club, what makes The Game work is that Fincher treats paranoia as a kind of twisted comedy. The joke is on a man who has spent his entire life controlling everything around him, suddenly unable to control anything at all. A faceless institution knows more about him than he knows about himself, and the movie shows how terrifyingly precise this is, because it's so familiar. Fincher has expressed that he wasn't happy with the ending, but The Game is more about the journey than the destination. Number 4. The Social Network. On paper, The Social Network shouldn't be this good. It's a movie about a website, told almost entirely through courtroom depositions, starring a cast of 20-somethings arguing about intellectual property and stock dilution. But Fincher masterfully turns it into one of the most compelling movies of the decade. Jesse Eisenberg plays alleged human being Mark Zuckerberg as a social outsider who builds the world's biggest social network and loses every relationship he has in the process.
Of course I apologize.
I have to go study.
You don't have to study.
Why do you keep saying I don't have to
Because
study?
you go to BU. Want to get some food?
Andrew Garfield plays his best friend Eduardo Saverin, the one person who believed in him early. and the film's emotional gut punch is watching that friendship get dismantled. Arnie Hammer plays both Winklevoss twins using face replacement technology, and Rooney Mara appears in the opening scene and never leaves your mind for the rest of the film.
It'll be because you're an asshole.
The structure is Aaron Sorkin's. 3 conflicting depositions, 3 versions of the same story, none of them entirely reliable. Sorkin won the Oscar for Best Screenplay and structured it like a legal version of Rashomon, where the truth shifts depending on who's talking. Fincher's job was to make people sitting in rooms talking feel like a thriller, and he does it with the same precision he brings to serial killers and government conspiracies. The first scene alone took 99 takes. By the end, you forget you're watching a movie about a website. Instead, you're watching a movie about loneliness and the price of selling your soul. Number 3. Zodiac. What makes Zodiac genuinely engaging is that Fincher isn't really making a movie about a serial killer. He's making a film about obsession and what it does to people who can't let go of an unsolvable mystery. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Robert Graysmith, a San Francisco Chronicle cartoonist who becomes consumed by the Zodiac killer case across 15 years, sacrificing his career, his marriage, and eventually his sanity, chasing a man who was never caught. Mark Ruffalo and Robert Downey Jr. play the detective and the reporter, orbiting the same obsession, but from different angles. Graysmith's obsession on screen mirrors Fincher's meticulousness behind the camera, a director so committed to accuracy that he digitally added hair to Gyllenhaal's knuckles in close-up because they looked too perfect. A director who spent 18 months doing his own research into the murders before a single frame was shot. The man is Graysmith. It doesn't end with a satisfying arrest because there wasn't one. The Zodiac killer was never caught, which isn't Fincher's fault, but the fact that the case still haunts you after the credits roll is entirely his. Number 2. Seven. Seven is where Fincher stopped being a music video director and became a filmmaker. A rookie detective, played by Brad Pitt, and a world-weary veteran, played by Morgan Freeman, hunt a serial killer using the 7 deadly sins as a blueprint, in a city so relentlessly bleak it feels like a character itself. Kevin Spacey plays John Doe, one of the great movie villains, and Gwyneth Paltrow plays Pitt's wife, in a role that becomes the entire weight of the film's ending. What Fincher figured out on Seven is that mood can be more powerful than shock. He builds the film like a vice tightening, not with jump scares or violence, but with information. Every scene teaches you something new and makes everything you already know feel worse. It's not necessarily what he does, but what he doesn't do. The camera doesn't shake. It doesn't show off. It doesn't tip you off with a close-up unless it absolutely has to. It just observes, like something that already knows how this ends. The ending lands the way it does because Fincher meticulously spends 2 hours building to it. The diner scene where Somerset meets with Mills's wife is the gruesome setup for what's to come.
But if you choose to have this baby, then you spoil that kid every chance you get.
Seven doesn't scare you with what it shows you. It scares you with what it makes you feel in the 10 seconds before you find out what's in the box. That gap between not knowing and knowing is where Fincher lives in your head, rent-free, and he's never been better at it than he was here. Number 1. Fight Club. Seven is a masterpiece in its own right, but Fight Club is Fincher on an entirely different frequency.
It was right in everyone's face. Tyler and I just made it visible. It was on the tip of everyone's tongue. Tyler and I just gave it a name.
Ed Norton plays an insomniac office drone, drowning in IKEA catalogs and self-help groups, yearning to feel something. Brad Pitt is the single-serving friend he meets on an airplane, a soap salesman offering him a different life. Helena Bonham Carter plays Marla Singer, the one person who sees through his facade. Based on Chuck Palahniuk's novel, it's a film about masculinity, capitalism, and what happens when men who feel nothing decide that destruction is the only honest response. But the uncomfortable truth is that the film was more than just a cautionary tale. It wasn't predicting a fringe movement. It was describing something already building underneath the surface of a country that had replaced meaning with consumption, and told men that the solution was a better car. Advertising still has us chasing cars and clothes and things we don't need. But the fight clubs just moved online. What puts this at number one isn't just craft, although the craft is extraordinary. The dark humor, the Pixies, Tom Waits, the Dust Brothers score, how he weaves the story to a twisted climax. But it's the way he captured a specific moment in American life. The internal struggles we experience to this day, whether we ignore them or not. The anger was already there. The emptiness was already there. David and Chuck just gave it a name.